Earthcore through audio podcasts right after 9/11 and has continued to do so with his current book since then. He has a weekly video podcast called Sigler in Place, which airs on Wednesday evenings on Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube for his social media. He has a rabid fan base of followers which call themselves Sigler junkies due to their bottomless need for more content from their beloved author. So, welcome, Scott.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for being here.
So we were just talking a little before you came on. We were just talking a little bit about the book.
Okay.
Are you mentioning? And does anybody have any questions they'd like to bring to Scott's attention?
Sure. Are you a spelunker?
No, I'm not, but I did go to the Mammoth Caves in Kentucky to research this book way back when, and went on the wild cave part of that. So the public tour that goes deeper than any other. And it was trippy because I'm not a very big guy, and there were places that I could not fit through in there that other people could. And the thing I remember most is there was like a bed of sand and rock right above that was so narrow that I had a normal hard hat on. I had to take my hard hat off and push it ahead of me because it wouldn't fit. I couldn't fit the hard hat through the area that was so narrow. So found out I'm not all that claustrophobic and got a lot of great information for the book.
Because I'm very large. I'm 6'5". And I'm claustrophobic. And when I read that part about Randy and Angus going through that cave and the fact that they were just going blindly in for 30 yards or whatever.
Yeah.
I was sweating. I was like, oh man, I would never do this. I'd rather jump off a cliff than get stuck in some rocks.
It's kind of terrifying, some of that stuff. I did get stuck at one point. I had this was many years ago, but the tour leader was like 6'2", 6'3", and just skinny as could be, but he was bigger. So I'm like, well, if he can get through an area, I can get through an area. And then he went through, and then a woman went through who was actually smaller than me. And so when I went through the same area, which is you had to slide head down through a very narrow hole, I got stuck. My hips got stuck. So my feet were up in the air and I'm hanging down. And people had to come kind of like shimmy me from the top as the guy pulled from the bottom to get me through. So it was really, really confined spaces and quite desolate in those areas too. It's just amazing how there's like absolutely nothing down there whatsoever when you get deep enough.
No aliens, huh? No.
I didn't find any. I made it back, so I didn't find any.
Scott, what I wanted to ask was the genesis for Earthcore. Did you come up with that before or after you went spelunking?
Oh, I came up with it before I went spelunking. The general concept of there's a couple of things that influenced it, but the concept of a highly advanced, intelligent race being trapped in a location and their population numbers dip below what is needed to support genetic diversity and avoid mutations and recessive genes coming out. And a lot of the stuff that had impacted the royal families of Europe actually was one of the influences of that, because they were so inbred through several generations, one line, it wound up causing a lot of issues with the people who would go on to lead nations. Like, what if that happened at a larger scale? And then I can't remember what year it came out. There was a movie called Broken Arrow with John Travolta and Christian Slater, I think. And there's a scene in that movie where a nuclear weapon goes off deep underground, and like the whole mountain range just kind of lifts up and comes back down. And those two things together. So I kind of could see the end of the book in my head. And then I want to see what would it take to turn an advanced alien race basically into cavemen who are using spears and stone tools, and kind of explore the story from there.
Interesting.
Now, I don't think I've ever seen anything in science fiction or horror before that was even similar to that concept of just a race devolving down to that primitive troglodyte kind of cannibalistic.
The time machine.
The time machine, yes.
That would be that's about the only thing I can make think. The Morlocks, yeah. Maybe.
And I think there might have been, I think a Doctor Who, old Peter Baker Doctor Who episode might have influenced it, where they wind up on a ship and No, they wind up on a planet, excuse me. And the people who ran the ship, like the bridge crew, were still intelligent and, cultured and educated. And then the survey team, or the survey team, as they call them, they had been cut off from the ship, so had devolved into, like pre-industrial civilization. And these two sides were fighting each other. And that I watched that when I was a little kid, but that I think that lodged in there as well as, even it would not take long for us, maybe 4 or 5 generations, if we're completely cut off from everything, to lose touch with the vast majority, the body of knowledge we've accumulated as human beings, and wind up at a real primitive level really quick.
Did you always know though that the alien octopi were going to be kind of a devolved culture? Or did that come out during the writing of the book?
No, that was planned from the beginning. And I'm a big biology buff, so I wanted to try and come up with an alien race that wasn't just a human with blue skin and bumps in their noses, as the Star Trek saying goes. So come up with something that's really, really, really alien. I know you guys are about to read Project Mary or have read it. That's another one that the author put in a lot of time to come up with a logical alien race that he probably evolved in his mind or on computer from single cell all the way up. And what were the evolutionary advantages based on the environment that they came from? So that was very similar. What I wanted to do with Earthcore is like, let's get an alien that actually looks alien.
Yes.
Yeah.
So who made the curved knives? Was it the aliens or was it the silver bugs that made the knives for them?
Well, I won't give too many spoilers, but there's a sequel to the book called Mount Fitzroy, and you can learn a lot more about that in there. But in Earthcore itself, those weapons are so finely machined that some of them are 10, 12,000 years old and still work just fine. They don't corrode, they don't really lose an edge. And the new ones are being made by the silver bugs. So the silver bugs, once the Rockby civilization dropped below a certain level of knowledge and started to go south in a hurry, the silver bug programming picked in, and they just started to pick up all the tasks that the Rockby weren't doing for themselves anymore. So the farming, the planting, to some degree, the harvesting, although the Rockby are bigger where they can do a better job at harvesting. And so and they also made all the machines and maintained the bomb and did all of that work. So kind of the servant becomes the master type thing. They were just highly advanced machines that helped a sentient race, and they wound up being the only thing that was keeping the sentient race alive.
Yeah. Did we lose audio?
Um,
Froze up on his end. You still there, Scott?
I'm right here. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay. Yeah, you cut out for just a moment there.
Okay.
Yeah, if you read some more of his books and other series that he has, like I said, I was mentioning before the meeting, Scott has his own Siglerverse, which a lot of his various books tie together. And in some of the other ones, you'll learn more about the Rocktopi. They go by a different name in the Siglerverse, as well as those wasp-like creatures that were hunting them and chased them to take refuge here on Earth. So you could learn a lot more about it. You could go to his website, and he's got all types of information. He's got charts and everything. It's really fantastic. John Viscar, right, who does that site?
John Viscar maintains the site, right? And if you guys did dig Earthcore, I highly recommend just jumping right into Mount Fitzroy. It's a really big book, but it explores a whole different perspective of the Rocktopi culture. I think it turned out pretty good.
I think well, obviously I've read it. I think Mount Fitzroy is 3 times as good as Earthcore, at least. You could see Earthcore was your first book, written back in right after 9/11 or sometime back around that time.
Yeah, it was right around that time. Actually, the side story is there was a site called publish.com, and they're not around anymore, but they were one of the first sites where you could vote things up. So the concept was it was a publisher, and instead of having their highly paid editors go through the slush pile and read all this stuff, they wanted to dump the slush pile reading off onto, readers, people like us. So you could upload your book there. And if you do, you had to read or review 3 books and give them scores before you uploaded it there. And then I uploaded Earthcore, and it went through the voting and got to the level where the editors actually consider it, which is like, I think the top 10% scores for a certain time period. And the editor read it and then turned it down. And then I happened to be in New York, and I was just a hungry, aspiring writer at this time. So if I was in New York, if I was traveling for business, I would find any publisher I'd had contact with, any agent, say, hey, you want to go get a beer? You want to go get dinner? Anything like that. So I called this guy, invited him out, and we went before we got to dinner, and I called him from the room. He's like, he had reread the book to be more familiar with it. So he wasn't just cold on it. And then the second time he read it, he liked it, and he wound up signing the book. So there's this old giant thick version of Earthcore out there. And because it won that contest, and then they were getting ready to put it out, and it would have been, this is old days of Barnes and Nobles and Borders, it would have been on the science fiction shelf in every bookstore in the country. And that's when that was coming, before they went to press. That's when 9/11 happened. And when 9/11 happened, that publisher just decided everything that's not profitable right now, we are cutting it and closing it all down. And iPublish was not yet profitable, so they closed it down, and the book languished for a long time until I got the rights back to it.
And then you released it as an audiobook, and that's how it arose to its popularity.
That was how the whole podcasting thing got started. Once I actually got the rights back, I put it out as a free podcast. And that's the first thing I put out as a podcast back in 2000. It started in March of 2005. And that wound up building an audience. And that was right about the time that 24 was out. The Kiefer Sutherland show and Lost was doing really well. So people were in the mood for long form serialized fiction, not just 30 minutes and it's all wrapped up at the end of the episode. So that, with the advent of podcasting, I was able to kind of capitalize on both of those things. And we built up a pretty big audience in fairly short order. And that led to the publishing deal eventually.
And then you eventually brought the book, and then you re-edited it and added like 50% more content. When you
That's correct.
It back in 2017 or something like that, 16, 17, something like that.
Yeah, it's a bit of an ebb and flow. When I first put it out with iPublish, I think it was like 127,000 words. And then when I went to work with their editors, like, we need this down to 85, I think. So I had to cut, clear almost a third of the book. And then when we bought it, by the time we were ready to put out and print ourselves as Empty Set Publishing, I was just a much better writer, much better at my job. I'd put in a lot more work to get better at certain aspects of it. So I didn't want to put it out as it was. And we thought we were just going to go through and do an edit on it. But right out of the gate, I'm like, there's so much more here that we could do. And since we were doing it ourselves, I didn't have a publisher tap me on the shoulder going, make it shorter, make it shorter. So it wound up being about 50% longer than the original Earthcore that was out in print.
Yeah.
You're a very prolific writer. Could you tell a little bit about how you schedule yourself and how you plan and conceive the books?
Well, part of what lets me write these books is I got kind of crazy ADHD. So I work very closely with who was my business partner and is now my wife. We started working together, and she's much better at scheduling things out and blocking things out, and determining a reasonable amount of time for me to work, so I'm not working 16, 17 hours a day, because once I get into it, that's all that's going on. So we kind of plot things out ahead of time, and it's run more like a small business now. So we have a product release schedule. We know when we're going to put stuff out, and I kind of sit down with her and we go over what the fans want, what we have. Do we have any contracts from other companies? And then say we're going to do this one, and then pretty much that's all I do. I focus on that book for that period of time, and she handles almost everything else except the social media, the reader interaction, and the website and the podcast. So that's kind of how we do it now. And I've had to learn to just stop thinking about all the other things that I want to be doing or I think I'll never get done, and just focus on the one book. If I focus on the one book and get that done, then that means we can put more stuff out for people.
I have to say, his wife is really a great collaborative partner for him as well. She's in the podcast too. It's a weekly podcast.
Yep.
So
Yep.
if I wanted to watch AB Sigler, she's fantastic.
She's there every Wednesday. We co-host the podcast together, which is really fun. That's a huge midweek escapism thing for us. Also, if I'm going to put that podcast on at 6:00 my time, I can't be writing until 5:50. So we have to kind of force stop at 3:00 to get ready for everything and do that. But it's very fun.
Okay, well, since Scott's, I know he's got something he's got to go to, so I want to just ask a couple more quick questions if I can. Scott, I noticed that I've read a lot of online criticism of the characters from Earthcore as being unlikable, even the protagonists. It takes a lot of time to come to care for them, so by the end, you're really desperately cheering for them to survive and escape from under the mountain. The surviving characters from Earthcore, this is too much of a spoiler, go on to become the protagonists in Mount Fitzroy. And some of them are greatly fleshed out and are much more likable. So was there an intent behind making them as unlikable in the first novel or was it maybe inexperience as you were a new writer back then, or?
Some of it is not understanding human psychology as well as I thought I did. Some of it was the general hubris of me as a younger writer thinking I had everything figured out. And some of it was exasperation in the stuff I read, like the Robin Cooks and all those series that had done very well. And I'm like, these characters, if they have one flaw, it's not a very big flaw. And it was just kind of, to me, it was fatiguing to read about these perfect people going out and doing stuff. So I tried to come up with people who were much more, what I thought were more akin to real life, a little bit more self-involved. Everybody's the hero of their own story. Nobody thinks they're the bad guy. Everybody thinks it's everybody else doing things to them. And I don't know if I went overboard on that or not, but that is something that is bled into my style and remains even to this day. Is you're not going to get a straight good versus evil with my stories. You're going to get a mixed bag. And one of the shows, it's
all blended characters. Yeah.
I like to think of it as, as well blended characters or people who are more real because they're not kind of goody two shoes. That's something that is still going on to this moment. It was hugely influenced by a television show, the Battlestar Galactica, the one that was out 15 years ago or so. They did a great job on that of having you on the edge of the seat because you don't know who to root for. And that's what really drew me in. Like, obviously I should be rooting for the human beings, perpetuate the race, but I'm also rooting for the Cylons. So when I would tune in every episode and not knowing who I want to win, that to me was incredibly riveting. So I try and write to that same expectation.
Now, go ahead. Scott, when you named the characters, I thought the names were really good. Did you have certain things in mind when you gave the characters their names in the book?
Yeah, several of them. Yeah. I was a huge fan of AC/DC, so I wanted to name an Angus character after the guitar player in that band. And that name kind of brought a certain personality to him. And then we're adding on the last name. And I like the idea of playing with the word cool suit with a K. And that was intentional. And Bertha Libran was very intentional because it's a more unusual name in American fiction, American culture, not so much in Europe. So let's not give her a flowery name like Genevieve or Juliet or something like that. Let's come up with a name that's like Bertha. Well, you don't hear that very often because part of O'Doyle and Bertha's relationship is they wind up being the people who make it through, but they're not the pretty people. They're not the Brad Pitt and the Angelina Jolie. They are down and dirty people who are scarred and messed up in the head from all the stuff that they've done. The service they perform for their country has left a lasting impact on them. So trying to come up with a couple character names there that, it's not like Dirk Steelheart. Like that's not going to work for O'Doyle. So, and then last one, I guess, was Connell Kirkland. I'm breaking it now, but I had a habit for a long time of using alliteration in the name of my main character. So Connell Kirkland was, that was it. And the rest of the names, I wrote this so long ago when I was putting out these names, the first draft so long ago, I would pull out the phone book and just start flipping through the phone book to find like, that's a cool name. That's a cool name. I don't hear that very often. And that's how I did it.
Yeah, and now he names, if you do certain things for him as a fan, like you get a tattoo, from one of his books, he'll name you as a character, minor character, who will very likely die in one of his novels.
Yep.
It's a great thing to do.
We have nine new characters.
Yeah.
9 characters in the book I just submitted the first draft on called Shakedown, which is a military sci-fi horror series. We just sent in book 1 first draft, and there's nine new characters in there who are people who got a tattoo. So a tattoo of something in the Siglerverse. That can be anything in the Siglerverse. And there we go. It winds up being everybody wins.
I wouldn't bet though that they last very long, any of those 9 characters.
It's a crapshoot now because that was originally the intent. Like you're going to get in the book and you're going to die in a horrible way. And I had people, this was a really eye-opening experience as a creator to have people emailing me and saying, please kill me in your book. Please just butcher me in the book. The worst way you can find to kill me. And I'm like, well, I hadn't planned on this, but all right, if that's what you want. And then in the new book, and sometimes just as the characters ebb and flow and certain things start to, when the characters become real people, which is a writer I define as when the characters stop doing what I have this extensive outline saying that they should do, and they start doing things that are not what I wanted them to do. Because it gets to the point where like, well, Bertha would literally never do that. Now that I've written this much on her, she would never do this thing that I needed her to do. Then I have to go back and re-outline. So that can happen with some of the fan named characters. So some of them have elevated to secondary character role. We'll wind up living through this book and we'll come back again for the next one. So that's kind of new.
That is great. Love it.
When you're writing the book, when you're writing Earthcore, did you have this, and the people, they had that core group in the tunnel that started out. Did you know which ones were going to make it out and how it was going to end?
I think for the most part I did. Yeah. I think there were probably some surprises in there for me. And there were surprises in, I assumed they would end this way and then they wind up ending a different way. But the O'Doyle Libran, that was intentional. Sonny McGinnis wound up being a surprise to me because that character just flowed so well that I couldn't bring myself to finish him off. And
My favorite.
Yeah, he was my favorite too.
he just wound up being this wonderful, flawed, one flawed guy who's a better guy than he thinks he is, which is always a fun thing to explore. But yeah, I could not finish him off. And by the time I've written, I probably did 20 drafts in this book to get the version you guys have in your hands. Sometimes you do that. It gets harder and harder to kill the characters. So if I'm to the point where I know a character is going to die and I absolutely do not want them to die, and I start looking for ways they might live, then I assume that you guys are going to be going through the same set of emotions. And Stephen King's a huge influence on me. And his general theory of writing is create characters that people care deeply about and then put them in the pressure cooker. And he doesn't really know who's going to live and who isn't going to live as he's going on. But that's the magic of his long career, is make these great characters that even the ones you don't like, you don't want to see die. And then you're on the edge of your seat. Because the other part of what he does that's influenced me is no character is safe. When you start a Stephen King book or when you start a Scott Sigler book, the character that you think is the lead right up the front, they might not make it past the halfway point. They could be gone. And I think once you establish that compact with the reader, I think it drastically up levels your emotional involvement as a reader in the story. This isn't a franchise. This guy's not on the cover of 6 books from now. When you're on book 1, she's on the cover of book 6. You're pretty sure she makes it, like that kind of thing. That's the thing I try to avoid in everything except my Galactic Football League series, which is it's pretty obvious to see the main character is going to live through those.
Right. Here's a quick question for the group though. Did anybody else besides myself, when you read the parts of Sonny, did you hear Samuel L. Jackson as the voice in your head? I kept picturing. Anybody else see that? Did you write it that way, Scott, by chance? Was Samuel L. Jackson one of those in your head? He might have, because I'm a huge Pulp Fiction fan, so that he definitely could have worked his way in there. But I kind of saw it as almost like a Chris Rock type character, Chris Rock when he's 75. He's so young.
He's lost all his money and he's crotchety. That's kind of what I saw it as.
Oh, that's awesome.
Scott, had you read the book The Descent before you put this together?
No, I had not. And that was an extremely frustrating moment for me as a young creator. I had Earthcore out. It had been on desks, and there were 2 books that came out, The Descent by Jeff Long and Subterranean by, it'll come to me in a second. But those 2 books came out, and there was so many similarities between Earthcore and James Rollins. There were so many similarities that I got upset and paranoid, because I oddly had a car stolen and I had the giant box of Xerox paper of the manuscript had been in the backseat of the car. That was back when it cost a fortune to print stuff like that. So the book had been out in the open, and I got so paranoid. I'm like, could this book have wound up on this guy's desk and he like riffed off on parts of it, which of course is completely ridiculous. The more you get into the business, you see like there are these things that influence people and create ideas, do the same thing to other people. But Journey to the Center of the Earth was an influence for it. But I'd put years and years into Earthcore, a long time. And then for the Descent to come out, are you talking about the movie or the book, you guys?
The book, I had friends that knew Jeff Long, so I read the book, and the book is very different than the movie. I guess
Yeah.
the movie's kind of
I think the movie's a completely different property. But when that came out and Jeff Long got this big deal for the book and he had another book as part of the deal, I can't remember what it was came out after. It was so frustrating because I had been working for 12 years at that 10 or 12 years at that point, going to every convention I could go to, meeting every editor I could meet, sending out, just completely abusing my company's photocopier machine and postage machine to send out chapters and outlines and full manuscripts, and going to work at 3 a.m. so I could use the copier to send stuff out. So I was really in it to win at that point. And when Descent came out, it was like, it was just frustrating. I think a lot of writers go through this. When you work a long time on a book and something similar to yours comes out, it can be jarring. It can be frustrating, but I still have not read Jeff Long's The Descent. After I read Subterranean, I'm like, I don't want to do this to myself anymore. I don't want to read books that are similar to mine. And somebody wound up with a great big deal in the book, which is frustrating because you like, if this made it to the marketplace, that probably means Jeff Long has a couple of contacts that I don't have, because clearly the marketplace will support this concept of the adventures going underground and running into trouble. So the older I get, the more I'm just like, yep, I'm avoiding that, not looking at that. That'll be fine.
Okay. Well, did anybody, I know Scott's you got to run here in just a few minutes, but does anybody have any final questions they want to bring to us?
I have one question for you.
Sure.
Scott, well, what is the book that you're most proud of?
The book that I'm most proud of, I think right now is Mount Fitzroy, because it encapsulates, like, we rewrote Earthcore and did an enormous amount of work to it to bring my current level of ability into that book and make it the best book it could be. But it's still, the whole structure and the whole legacy of that book at that point was some 15 to 20 years old. So there was a lot of stuff baked in that I could not alter, I could not change without having to rewrite it and make a completely different book. Whereas Mount Fitzroy, it's much more character driven. I've learned an enormous amount about how to write more realistic people and have you care deeply for someone who never existed. That's my job as a writer, to make you care deeply for someone who never existed. And I think that's on display in Mount Fitzroy quite a bit. And it's a really big over the top ending. And there are some really tragic characters in it that I think you really feel for. Even the ones
you really come to care about the characters a lot more.
Yeah.
I think,
And even these people,
do even in Earthcore.
and it was also very fun to take, like, that's the concept of a commando team in Predator, except these commandos all had their glory day 15 years ago, and now they're all pushing 50, and their bodies won't do what they want to do before. And they have all of this mental baggage from their time in the service and their time as a civilian, but they get a chance to make a really big score. So it's, now it's people my age going out to do stuff that should be done by 25-year-olds. So that part was really fun to play with throughout the whole book. So Fitzroy's the one I'm the proudest of.
Yeah, I really encourage you guys, if you liked Earthcore, even if you didn't like Earthcore that much, give Mount Fitzroy a chance, because it is a really awesome book. You had a final question?
Just one last question.
Sure.
When they're going through the tunnels, they come across some carvings, and one of the carvings is 3 cigar ships holding off a horde of wasp ships. Is there another wasp ship out there, or is that in Fitzroy?
Well, the wasps factor into Fitzroy, but the whole wasp ship, that is kind of the larger scope of the Siglerverse. So the wasp ships are referenced in the Galactic Football League series heavily. And by the end of the Galactic Football series, all the books come together. All the stuff from Earthcore, all the stuff from the Galactic Football League series, my Infected trilogy, my Generations trilogy, which is Alive and Light and Alone. So I can't answer that question because that's a spoiler. But by the time it's done, there'll be, I think, 25 novels in the whole thing altogether. So it's quite a big scope of how to, when we finally meet those dudes.
Any chance we might run into them in the crypt?
Yeah, definitely a chance you're going to run into them in the crypt. In the crypt,
Oh, excellent.
so the way it works is the book she read, Earthcore. So Earthcore, Mount Fitzroy, Ancestor, Infected, Contagious Pandemic, Ancestor, those and Nocturnal. Those are what I call the modern day science Sigler stories. So we aim that for the date that book is actually published in print is like calendar first day in the story. So kind of keeping them grounded to current events. And then there's the Crypt series, which is 600 years from now. Mankind has gone to the stars, found other species, gone to war with them. Kind of like a more savage Heinlein type situation. And then 200 years past that, or 800 years from now, that's the Galactic Football League, when all the different races have largely patched up their differences and are forced to play a game where they all have to cooperate in order to win, in order to force species integration. And that game happens to be football because of the different body types. So it's all goes through the whole thing. So yeah, you will see WASP stuff in the Crypt series.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Really, this has been fascinating, fun. So
I'll be glad you guys enjoyed the book.
Yeah, and see you tonight at the Sigler place. So
Yes, sir.
Thanks a
We'll
lot.
see you there. Nice to meet y'all.
Thank you,
Okay,
Scott.
bye.
Bye-bye.
So, yeah. There you
Okay,
go.
I guess now I understand the characters better.
Well, I think someone said, Sonny was the only character I liked at all, really, like in terms of wanting her to live.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Sonny and I like
Veronica, we don't care
Sanjay, but
much
he
more.
didn't.
Sanjay's,
Yeah.
yes, and I've read online and others of these things that is the same ones that a lot of people who didn't care for the book otherwise loved Sanjay and they loved Sonny.
Yeah.
The rest of them, they said I could give it crap less until it got near the end, and then they're all start dying off real quick. You know, as you see.
I
in the book.
like Bertha a lot.
Yes,
Yeah, I like
and like Bertha and O'Doyle. Those are the other two.
Oh,
And I even like
O'Doyle is
Kirkwood.
less-
I
less
like
likable than
Kirkwood.
But
Only
what
at
makes
the
him
end,
good,
after
I
he got
personally,
nicer.
from my perspective,
Yeah.
When he got
is the
nicer.
relationship between him and Bertha.
Yeah.
To me, it's one of the strongest love stories.
I know, and it's
It's
so
sweet. I mean,
unconventional.
it unconventional, I think, sort of, but it's really nice, and I kind of, and they are major, if you like those two characters, they are major parts of Mount Fitzroy.
Yes,
So,
when he was describing Bertha, for some reason that James Bond character Jaws kind of came into some of the way he was describing her features and so that they were these two,
yeah,
you know.
Not beautiful.
But
no,
they
they're
have
not
this-
beautiful,
this-
but
this
they
character
are,
people.
as people,
Right.
Bertha is really a nice, good, strong character.
Mhm.
She hates what she did in the past. You know, she loves, I mean, boy, he really gets the love between those two characters down. And for me, I just really got into that part of the relationship.
But the one part that was tough was, or like, he liked to show the flaws, was her dislike of the Professor Reeves. That just seemed like it was too much. I didn't see why she would, hate her that much, or fix that on that.
I think she represented everything she wasn't and maybe wanted to be. She was beautiful, she was famous, but still she was this pushy, selfish character
Obnoxious, awful creature.
that
Yes.
had everything, but still just wanted more, and it was her way, or,
Oh, look at Farm Girl. I mean, talk about it.
oh, she was a psycho. I mean,
Yeah, there's nothing redeeming in her at all
No.
whatsoever.
No,
No.
she was the worst character in the book.
But
In my-
but it was
my
most
opinion.
satisfying when she dies at the end. So,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, that was one thing I didn't get at the end, when they were talking to the, and Bertha and Patrick were talking, yeah, Yeagley, they were talking to Yeagley. They're blaming the aliens, as for the death of Kirkwood, but it was really Kayla.
Yes,
So I said, well then.
and that
What? I
that
didn't
comes up
understand.
in the next novel in a big way, because like I can't spoil it for you, but you find out that it's not what you think it is. And even in this book, you can tell they're off on the aliens, but they're really off by the second book when you find out more about the other ship. So,
Huh.
yeah, they're not the same.
Wait, quick
You are
question.
kind of convincing me to read the second one.
So,
Yeah,
If you
because
found
I,
anything redeeming in this one, like I said, is 3 times as good. Well, you've read a quarter of it or so. You said,
Yeah,
or so, yeah.
I really like it.
And I love the military aspects too, the mercenary teams. This one's, I was telling Brad that that this is a lot more, military related than this one was. Because this one, you
Yeah.
just got security guards and stuff like that, plus,
Plus they all got wiped out.
and they all get wiped out, yeah. This one, they send in mercenary teams to go in under the mountain down there in Mount Fitzroy, so.
huh.
You were saying something?
oh, I'll figure it out though. I only read to the point where, O'Doyle steals Angus's cool suit and says to keep running, then he died soon after that. I didn't read that part.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah.
He gets it too.
I'll let you know, no.
Finish?
Cool.
I was like 25 pages.
Not.
I got-
He leaves it open. He
Yeah.
leaves it open in this one. You
He leaves it
don't
open,
know
okay.
in this book what happens
Okay,
to
good.
Angus.
Yeah.
You will find out immediately in the next book what happens to Angus.
Okay, good. That's good to know. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I tried to read like when I was sitting over there, I like quickly got through, but I wasn't sure what happened.
Well, without, I mean,
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
doesn't say.
Yes, okay, that's good. I'm glad I didn't miss that.
all you know is he was running up the mountain,
Yes.
but then they pick it up, I think, in the very few first few
Very,
pages there
very
about
beginning of the book.
Angus's part and what happened, what happened to him and stuff like that, so.
Because everybody's death is described in pretty gory detail, except for the ones that didn't die.
Yeah.
But there was so much, when you talk about that, maybe this is like, you talking, this was one of his first books. They all had kind of the same flaw of the way they hated other people. That it seems too similar. They'd be different.
Yeah,
I
that's a good
noticed
point. I
a
did
tone
notice.
of anger. Everybody seems about something.
And they want to kill somebody over the stupidest thing,
Yeah.
like the Angus character. He wants to kill his supposedly best friend,
I
Randy,
got the
because
impression,
he was
Yeah.
just standing up for
He was
himself.
just chicken. He was.
he was a moment of cowardice.
He had
And he has, okay, I can't say that, but.
Yeah.
There's regrets that the survivors of the first book have in the second book. A lot of remorse,
Does-
so much remorse.
Does Sonny show up in the second book?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Sonny, Lybrand, and O'Doyle are the 3
Yeah.
surviving main characters that
Yes.
go on into the second book. So,
Yeah, I was just, the anger level, or even what's her name, Kayla.
you don't
She
feel
wanted
it
to
as
go
much in
after
the next one.
Angus, but it was like, at that point.
Well,
it
she's
was
angry at
really
everybody.
low.
Everybody,
Yeah.
she's one of
wants
those
to
that
kill
blames
everybody.
everybody for everything
Yeah,
that goes wrong in her life.
I think
She blames others.
She would have
It's
killed
never her fault.
anybody.
Yeah, because they
I
were
mean,
there.
she loved her pliers were her favorite toy.
God, that is
Please.
It was
horrible.
interesting when he said,
Horrifying.
when he said that he started this, 20 plus years ago, 9/11, 2000, so he's already almost had it. So we read it before then. A lot of the language and the stuff that they when they're dissing each other, it's definitely from that era. It would not maybe fly. I'm not sure you even write that, or you would not write that in the book. This era, that's kind of what I noticed, and I didn't know that it wasn't. I didn't know
That's
that
a good
it
point.
was before 2017 until
Well, like you said, he wrote it in 2001
yeah.
and rewrote it in 2017, adding all these extra chapters and details and fleshing out the characters. Because he knew by that time with the success of it, he was going to be able to write a sequel.
Yeah.
And he might even write a 3rd book to finish it.
I was just thinking about
There, so.
Kayla's fixation upon, calling Angus and Randy gay. That's just something that it was very something you talk about in the 90s and
No, yeah, I don't think you're right.
Yeah.
You wouldn't use those words, if you kind of.
Yeah.
So a publisher might have, an editor or a publisher might have some issues with that. And I don't think Scott would necessarily put that in there either.
But it's realistic because that's what, but again, you just wouldn't see it
It
now.
feels a little dated.
Yeah, it feels a
It's
little
big
dated.
standard.
Yeah, I did think
But
that.
you go back and read a Stephen King novel from 1970,
Yeah.
something like The Stand or something like that, and it stands out like, wow, you can tell this has not been written in 40 years, hasn't been updated. So.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah, what's the Stephen King one with, maybe it's one of the first ones with the vampire,
Oh, Salem's Lot.
Salem's Lot. I read that recently and definitely I could tell it was very,
Feels.
it's definitely older. It was before I was born.
Yeah, so. Well, anybody else have any comments they wanted to add? Jane, you got it?
Anybody else read?
Jane, did you get it? finish the book?
Yeah, I did get it, and I will say some of the last 100 pages I was skimming pretty fast, but I
That's
did.
the best part, because that's all the action is taking place in the last 100 pages. Everything else is a buildup. The first half of the book is all buildup to get to, we find out what's going on.
Yeah, but I did get through it, even though it was somewhat overwhelming when I picked it up and realized I only had just over a week to read 570 pages.
Yeah, the sequel is 900 and, I don't know, what is it, almost 900 pages.
Wow,
Yeah, you can see how much thicker it is.
yeah, but it reads fast.
I think so.
Well, this read fast, and
Yeah,
like.
I stayed up late a few nights.
Doug and I talked about how like we're gonna not read, we forget it otherwise, so I was on page 200 2 days ago, and it's great.
Well, that's good. Well, I'm so glad you guys, read through it and stuck with it. I mean, that's really great. I was really afraid I'd been reading, because I had not read all these online reviews of the book. Man, almost more than 50% of them were negative. So I was thinking, oh God, I considered it. I said, am I gonna be the only one here that liked this book? And you guys all show up and it's like, you're all giving me the stink eye because I picked a sticker.
So
Like I did with, what was that other one, Birmingham's book a few years ago, last year.
I really like The Descent as well, Jeff Long's
Yeah.
book. And apparently Jeff Long is friends with Mike. I never met him personally, but but I read that, and the movie's nothing like, the movie's a strict horror movie. But
Yeah.
if you like this, I recommend reading the book The Descent, because it's kind of got the same,
But it's not like the movie.
the movie's like a pure horror movie, and like it's kind of like a slasher type. It just loses everything. So they just didn't. But the book is more like this, but a lot of the things that make it scary are different than what's scary in this book, even though it's about demons underground. Yeah.
I thought there were creatures underground in Descent.
Yeah, I think they call them demons.
Oh, in the book they call them demons?
I believe so. Yeah.
Oh, that's the deal.
Which one is Descent? What's the story on that one?
Descent.
They're the divers and spelunkers, aren't they?
I don't remember. I remember just, if I told you what I remembered, it would
Okay,
ruin the story. But I just remember I really enjoyed it. And when I read this, I'm like, there was a lot of similarities. And I don't remember what I liked and disliked about that book. Like what I
Which one
noticed
came
about.
out first? Did Descent come out or did?
He kind of suggested the Descent came before this, is what he
well,
suggested.
this one was ready to go, and then it got shut down, and then by the
I was
time.
trying to look it up.
And you had it ready to go out the door, Descent came out.
By, who is up?
Jeff Long.
Jeff Long.
The one question I didn't get to ask that I wanted to is, why Utah? Did he have any connection to that area?
Oh, good question. Yeah. I may, I'm gonna be on, I'll be watching Sigler in Place tonight. Usually towards the end of the show, he usually takes like the last 20 minutes and answers questions about his books and stuff like that. People will address to him and I will ask him.
Because I don't know that area of the Wawas.
No,
And
I wasn't even sure if the Wawas really existed.
No,
I
I
didn't
think
know
he
that.
made that up.
But I
Once
spent
again,
a lot of time in Colorado,
I asked
so-
the question.
Close enough that he did.
Is there such thing as a Wawas?
Do they exist or?
I
I
think
don't
so.
know.
Okay, so this says, no, what I'm looking at is
Oh.
Jeff Long's book was published in 1999.
So around the
Descent.
same time, they might have like crossed over each other
Ah.
and didn't even know of each other's existence until they got.
Yeah,
And he
So-
said that his book, that he had it on people's desks before, and that
Right.
he released it as a audio book right after
Yeah.
September 11th, so.
Are his other novels this long? Has anyone read, I can't remember if I've read Infected and Contagious.
Oh, if you did.
I haven't read
I
any
think
of
they
his
would stick
other
with
ones.
you. I don't think any man who ever reads Infected could forget that novel.
Okay.
There's a
Okay.
reason why. There's something, you think Kayla Myers and her pliers is that?
Oh, okay.
Wait till you get to the chicken scissors.
Oh, God. Okay, so yes, Wawa Mountains are in Utah.
Yeah, Infected is one of my favorite series. That's how I learned, that's how I became a fan of Scott in the first place, was through the Infected series. And I read the first book there and I said, oh, I can't read this. But I went back and read it and then I kept going. And by the third book, when he concludes the Infected series, it's like, oh, this is my favorite series, one of my favorite series now. I mean, Seriously, of all the stuff I've read, that's one of my favorite series.
Wow.
And that's when I knew right then and there, I became a lifelong Scott Sigler fan, so.
Well, I thought he did really well, even though this is his first one, you know, we can say his character.
For a first book, that's pretty damn good.
But his action scenes, when stuff happened, was very quick and very, it was engaging. It really flowed well.
Yeah, I do give him that.
I mean, it's a roller coaster. When the action finally does start, it's like a roller coaster that just goes down and up, and that doesn't gotta come back up. It just keeps going.
And you can be more forgiving now that after he spoke and he
Yeah.
recognized that it was his first book and he wasn't fleshing out the characters as
No.
well.
Yeah.
And the dialogue, I mean, no offense, I have friends in Australia, and they don't always say, you know, he kept saying maid and Sheila and those kind of terms. It was like, okay, you watch too much. What was that? Crocodile Dundee. But yeah, but once he had not acknowledged it, you can be much more forgiving.
Yeah, and that he didn't want his characters to be perfect.
Yeah.
Are these other books as long? I mean, he's.
No, not this. This is probably the biggest book he's written. It's
Well, that's
Fitzroy.
But are they as long?
Infected is probably maybe, I don't know, I'm not really sure. I don't think Infected is much longer than Earthcore, maybe shorter.
That's still a long book when you look at all these novels he's written.
Mhm.
But, you know, this book was, you know.
Well, he only writes about 1 or 2 novels a year. Now we started writing a bit more frequently, but.
This book was something that you could kind of read in a week or so. I'm just finishing up Cryptonomicon, which is 918 pages long, and I had to stop doing that so I could jump into this to be ready for today. And I've been on that for months, and it's just, so even though this was 577 pages long, it was, it cruised. Or the other one that I read, you know, 30 pages, like, oh, I'm gonna put this down for a while, I gotta think.
That book is a very dense one. What's that one about again? I know I've read it. but it's-
Cryptonomicon is by the same guy who did Snow Crash, which is the more famous one. It's kind of cool because it's probably about cryptocurrency before we even knew what that was, but it's about World War II and the Nazis and the Japanese, and
Okay.
they're on the Philippines, and it's a really interesting book. Well, especially I think it came out in 1999, and so none of us knew about the internet. I knew a little bit, but he has to talk about the internet like it's a brand new thing, and it's pretty funny.
Infected is 352 pages.
352.
Oh, okay, so it is less than Earthcore then, okay.
So if we don't go for Mount Fitzroy, would you say Infected is the next one to read then?
You know what,
I agree.
I just read one of these things, they told you, say what order to read his books. And let me see if I can find what you guys are talking about. I think if I were, I would say it, I believe Earthcore and Mount Fitzroy are, if you're reading the contemporary books of his, those are the last 2 you should really read. Infected, Contagious, and Pandemic. And then I think Ancestor, I think it's that order. And then there's another one. I'm trying to remember what it is here. Hold on. Or what they recommend. And I said, oh yeah, that's perfect.
Nocturnal and Pandemic.
Yeah.
So what made you suggest
Here it
Earthcore
is.
instead of
sorry?
Infected? Sorry, I was just saying, you started with Infected.
Yes. That's the very
So-
first page I
So
read.
what made you recommend Earthcore for the book club?
Well, because Infected, yeah, it's also kind of, I guess you're right. I probably could have gone with Infected first. That's a good question. I don't remember why I picked Earthcore, but I thought Earthcore would be the most relatable one to the group at the time. I guess that's what I was thinking. So,
Plus, isn't this his first book?
yeah, right. So anyways, the way this other blogger recommends Infected, Contagious, and then you go outside the Infected series, you read the standalone novel Ancestor. Then you read Nocturnal, which is another one of his. And then finally you read the last Infected book, which is called Pandemic. And then when you read all those, then you read Earthcore and Mount Fitzroy. And then when you've read all those, you're at the end of his recommendations of all those contemporary novels. So if you want to see the list here.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, it's right there. So,
can take a picture of it that way. I can have that.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
When you're done, could I,
Yeah, I'll pass it over.
yeah, thank you.
But that last question I had for him was, I was, maybe I didn't phrase it right, maybe it spoke, but one of the rock carvings had 3 of the cigar ships.
That's the Wasp race. I forget what the name.
No.
Oh.
The cigar ships are the rock.
Here you go.
Rocket Pie. So the Wasp one, I forget.
So, but it has 3 of those holding off this horde of wasp ships.
Mhm.
So I wanted to know,
Oh, is there a third ship?
is there a 3rd ship on Earth somewhere?
Ooh, I hadn't noticed that. I didn't think about that. I wonder
Yes,
if
because there's
gonna be
a, we got, I'm not where you are yet, but we got to assume the other ship was at Mount Fitzroy, so there's got to be a 3rd possibly.
Yeah,
Some-
so
Oh, I didn't
that's why I'm
catch
looking for a 3rd.
I don't think so. I don't believe so, because I believe in Mount Fitzroy. At some point, he talks about that.
Okay.
Well, see, now I can't spoil it. If I tell you that, then you'll know something about the aliens. So
Okay.
I think there's only 2 ships that landed on. So.
Yeah.
Yes. Did you want to see them?
That-
Sure.
So I think before I said the wrong name when I was talking about this series I really like recently, but it's the Salvation series by Hamilton. Have you read that one?
I've heard of it, I haven't read it.
That could be a good one. I just enjoyed those so much. Peter Hamilton.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
This,
I've
so,
heard of that series.
yeah, I don't know if the 3rd one might have just come out. I haven't read it yet. It might be just coming to our library now, but the first 2 I read. Well, the first one especially was just.
Who's the author?
Well, why you said it because of the idea of like these wasp ships and, people, space is a really dangerous place that other races are trying. That was very well done in that book and the Salvation series.
Well, like I said, he expands upon the survivors, the Rocketpie, and these wasps in his Galactic Football League that takes place, centuries in the future and stuff like that. So you get to learn more about these
Well,
races and stuff.
Huh.
In the part that I really skimmed at the end really quickly, it kind of talked about how that there was instructions for the Rocketpie to kill anything from the surface, like that they devolved already. So there's this idea, in my mind at least, that maybe when they were more intelligent, they were less that way. Yeah. Or less just stupid, like just kill everything.
No, you're right on the money there. So.
That was the other thing I didn't get at the end was why would they even feel the need to go back and blow up the whole mountain? Because those creatures, if they hadn't gotten out of the mountain and their environment for thousands of years, why would you fear them or feel that you had to destroy all of them? I mean, it was only when people invaded their home.
Well, that was kind of the flaw of the professor, that they killed her dad and that, because she was, they talked about her mentally being unstable.
Well, she was. She's
But-
mentally unhinged by all this.
But of all the people that were left behind, she was the most physically together. Like, I don't think she had any, she wasn't missing 2 fingers from her hand like Earth. So,
Yeah, she wasn't all shot up.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, she could have survived. I mean,
Yeah,
if
she
she
could have
hadn't had
survived.
the need for revenge, to avenge her father and having the mental breakdown, she could have gotten out of the mountain. I think she
Yeah.
could have made it with Bertha
And I
had
think
a good
that-
shot. at getting
I
out
think
there,
that
so.
had he written it, or gone back, he could have made her look even more unhinged, because the unhinged just wasn't, that could have been drawn on a lot more to make it, better.
Yeah.
But even the characters that survived, that go on in the next book, they're all, have all this revenge, they want to get back at the villain. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. Why? They're not.
Well, as you read it at the very end of this one, O'Doyle's pretty vengeance oriented.
Yeah, but
Revenge.
it was Caleb, it
Avenge.
wasn't them that killed.
Yeah, well, he cared, he liked Connell and he wanted to get, he felt, a need to.
Yeah, it expands on.
Yeah.
He looks on Collins as the person that saved his life.
Right, no, I know that
Yeah.
part, but I'm talking about the reason for the death of him was not necessarily those creatures, it was Caleb.
He didn't see all that though, so he's still thinking it's the creatures responsible for that. I mean,
But he
didn't-
knew that they were trying to get, Kayla was there,
Mhm.
and he knew that there was
That
a
she's probably wanted to
strategy.
kill
yeah.
him.
Well, the only, so not having read the next book, the only person who made like the right decision to like get out was Sonny.
Yeah.
So I don't understand how Sonny's gonna get back to this, because I'm
Once
saying,
again, he's my favorite character.
I want Sonny to take his $1 million and go to Mexico, and just enjoy the rest of his life.
1%,
Yeah.
he thought, 1% of billions and billions and billions, and he's set for life.
But then, so he decided to
Yeah, but
leave.
you have to live to
So,
enjoy
you
the
know,
money. There's
He's
nothing
the one
else.
that made it tough. She was the only character because, Kayla, did not have to, she kind of let her megalomania of getting her job. So everyone let the thing get to them except for him.
Yeah, it really is. She is the ultimate. I mean, the Octopi are tools, but they're not really the super villains, even though that's what most of the book leads them. It's really Kayla who's the ultimate villain.
I have one really important question though. Okay, so in this book, it mentions a pandemic.
Yeah.
That's the infected series.
Okay, so that's before.
That's the infected series.
So-
when I talk about the destruction of Chicago, that's
Yes.
part of the infected series.
So what I kind of was waiting for in here that, because, I thought the reason Kayla might have been kicked out, not knowing about the kids, breaking the kids down, but I thought maybe that she was the one that gave the information away that allowed the infected series to happen. So I was waiting for that.
No,
to appear in here.
she shows up briefly in, I think, Ancestor, but this is the only novel she's ever really in.
But isn't that, you've read the infected, it's like that, but I thought they're just so interesting that this book is like, because now pandemics like just in all of our heads, like, there's a pandemic in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, just mentions it. Like I said, Scott in all his books drops Easter eggs leading to his other books. So if you want to know more about this, you got to go read that other book.
There are a lot of books.
That sounds like
a lot.
Because the list said to read that one first, that seems interesting now. I'm like,
Yeah, I like I said, in fact, it caught me and I just couldn't put the damn thing down. Like I said, I did put it down because it was so horrifying in certain parts. And then I went back and I just had to keep reading and it's like, wow, okay.
Well, David,
We have Infected. It's actually here on the shelf too at the library. So.
you're pretty knowledgeable about all his books. I don't know if you've read that, all of them, but who are the science fiction writers that influenced him the most?
Oh, boy.
He
has
mentioned
so many.
Stephen King, but I mean
Yeah.
science fiction as opposed to horror kind of thing.
I'm not really sure who all is. I'd have to go back and look at some of his stuff. It's if you go to his website, Sigler, scottsigler.com,
Mhm.
you can read all about how his influences and stuff like that.
Because he mentioned movies and TV shows.
Yeah,
but he
well,
didn't
that's
mention-
another thing I love about Scott Sigler. He and I are about the same age. He's a Michigan guy. He talks on his show all the time about movies he likes, books he likes, and they're all the same ones I like.
Right.
So it's like, oh man, this guy is my spiritual blood brother. I mean, my literary blood brother. I don't know what you call it, but I feel a kinship with him like a few other authors. So that's part of the reason I like him as much as I do. So.
Yeah, I didn't realize he was from Michigan.
Oh yeah, Sheboygan.
Yeah.
He lives in like San Diego or something like that. He wanted to get away from our winters and stuff like that. But,
Yeah.
So.
I was surprised. I always think of authors as kind of a slow speaking, English type.
Not Scott.
No.
And he was just a machine gun,
Oh, that's his, you watch his show, he's like that on his show too. But they have a lot more fun. Boy, he is like, they laugh so much on their show. If you want to watch it tonight, 9 p.m., if you're home, you can go to Facebook and put in Scott Sigler, Facebook.
I'm not on Facebook.
Well, or YouTube or
YouTube.
Twitter. You can do all those things. You can just look up Scott Sigler.
I can do YouTube.
I can do YouTube.
Yeah, and just look up Scott Sigler, he'll come right up.
And you
Watch
can
the
get his
show.
podcast there?
Yeah, that's where I watch it every Wednesday since the pandemic started is when he takes that podcast going, so.
Wow, like just a half hour or
It's
something?
an hour,
Oh, okay,
sometimes a little less, but usually about an hour.
yeah.
Good, and this is totally off topic in terms of science fiction, but there's a podcast that started about a month ago called The Bookcase. It's really enjoyable. It's just generally, it's Charlie Gibson from Good Morning America. He retired. He and his daughter during the pandemic, he would send her books, and then because they couldn't see each other in person, they would discuss the books on the phone. And her husband got the idea, well, you two should start a podcast. So they did. And they have some really good authors, really enjoyable.
Interesting.
I think the last one was this first-time author who wrote a book about an octopus. Shirley Van Pelt. because she had read the story about, it was an aquarium. And they took video of this octopus
Eric.
trying to get out. trying to escape. And so
Sorry
she
about the
wrote a
late
book,
addition.
that was the basis of the
I hope you weren't
book.
waiting very long.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so anyway, if anybody's interested, it's called The Bookcase.
Oh, okay.
And he has like, he had an author from Ireland who actually had lived in the United States for a while, went back. And he had Oprah Winfrey was his first guest. And then authors, and then the last 10 minutes or so are dedicated to an owner of a independent bookstore.
All right. Well, I'll put that in our notes when I send out the email, wrap it up this thing next week or something like that. I'll mention that again, since you recommended it. So.
Thank
And I
you
recommend
for bringing Scott Sigler in. That was really, really interesting, having him talk about his books and his process.
Oh, good. I'm glad you liked it.
And that was great.
Well, I'm glad I had the opportunity. I can't say I have a lot of author friends I would invite to this, but I'm glad I did invite Scott. So maybe if we, maybe next year, if we do another one of his books, if you guys are interested, I'll get infected for that time or something like that, or, you know, you
Yeah.
guys think you would like to maybe try that out and don't read it ahead of time, so.
Okay, I'm gonna make my pitch.
Maybe I could have Scott come back.
Well, that's great. I'm gonna push one more time for Clara and the Sun.
Okay.
I just think it's so different from what we normally read. I think it's really well written.
I
thought
take
it was
any
already-
recommendation you guys have. You guys always leave it up to me,
And
but I
it's
will
a
take whatever you
standalone
guys.
book.
Yeah.
So it's not a series, it's just, it's all by
Thank
itself.
God.
Well, let's,
Everything we read leads to a series of books.
And it's very, very different than what we've read, so.
What's the name of it?
Clara and the Sun.
Oh, I read that. That was
But
really,
he's actually British, but of Japanese descent. 'cause
You
the
said you read it,
author-
Kathy?
yes, I did read that. That was very good.
Oh, okay.
I
I'd
didn't like,
recommend it too.
You didn't like it?
I didn't like the ending,
Oh.
but I like,
of that one?
yeah,
Conversation.
Claire and the
You
Sun.
did read it too. So all three of you have read it already. Oh, okay. Maybe that's a good book to have. Then. Okay. Keep that in mind for next year when I make up the list. So. All right. Well, anybody else have any closing thoughts they want to add? I know Eric, you came late, but I will have. I did record the whole thing, so if you want to watch Scott's part of the interview or whatever, I will.
That would be very nice.
Yeah. So.
What was everybody's thought about the book? Did they enjoy it, or what was the gist of the or what their consensus?
Consensus was, yeah, I think the consensus is most of us did enjoy to one degree or another. I think they're more interested, some of them are more interested now that they actually listened to Scott talk about
Sure.
it, so.
Yeah,
And they're interested in maybe a few of his other books in his series, as Scott really was making them sound enticing, so.
he explained why his characters were so unlikable.
Yeah, there was a point. There was a point for me where, I get it. If you have a couple of profane characters, fine. But really, every single person in the book is, not to demean sailors, but swearing like a sailor, like to include the scientist. I mean, come on. They all basically had the same voice. And while I really enjoyed the book, at the same time, it became very wearing on me. And I was kind of speeding up just to kind of get through it. Because
Maybe you didn't hear the part where, though, we did say that was his very first book that he wrote and got published.
And that doesn't surprise me, because that was going to be one of my questions. I was saying, was it your first book? And,
And he later went back and rewrote it back in 2015 or 17, something like that, and he expanded it by about 50%. So.
Right. I've got this odd connection with a West Side Motorcycle Club. It's one of the oldest in the country. They don't swear that much. So.
Yeah. Well, he had some really good ones in there though, like Barbara Yeagley was talking about something about, the last time I had this feeling of, wanting to get with somebody, you were still in high school, wanting to feel go up in the back.
Yeah.
That language
I loved
was
her.
a very good character.
As a secondary character, I liked her a lot.
I liked her a lot, yeah.
Not as much as Sunny, but I liked her a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that Sonny made it. If Sonny would have been killed off, I would have been pissed. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I would have been too, yeah. He was the one, well, he's the smart one that didn't go into the mountains, so, you know.
Yeah, one of the things I noted, and I was gonna compliment,
Rescuing, you know, the two
Bertha.
characters, yeah, Bertha and O'Doyle. so-
And he got out of that camp.
And he smartly never went into that camp, you know.
No,
He was, but I mean, he
was
got
at
out
the camp,
before.
and then he just said, this is.
He had a bad feeling.
I got a really bad feeling.
Yeah.
He tried to talk Cho.
But it was interesting.
Oh, I miss Cho. I kinda
Yeah,
would say
why
I
is
like
it-
Cho.
I like Cho
Yeah, I was
I
hoping
like
they
Cho
killed
Takashi,
him.
yeah. Well, he doesn't. That's a Scott Sigler.
He didn't want to see go, but they did go.
Yeah.
That's what Scott Sigler does in
Yeah.
all his novels. You get the kick, you get these characters who, it's just like, oh, I like this guy. Oh, he's dead. Damn it. You know, I said,
It's
"Oh."
like Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it's like Game of Thrones. Yeah, that is. He kills off characters you like. The ones you like get killed. The ones you hate, they just go on and on and on. Like, come on, somebody kill this guy or this girl or whatever.
Take out space.
Yeah, you kind of like Cho and Sanji, but then you kind of think Randy and maybe Mac are just kind of okay. Like, there's
I
just
like
different
Randy
levels of
too.
like,
Randy,
yeah.
I thought was,
Yeah.
Randy was a good character too. And it, you know, it's like, oh,
I
come
would,
on.
yeah, Matt.
But my Randy like level of liking was not as high as.
No, I like Joe and I like,
Yeah,
that was very cool. Hey, there's a great English series on TV called MI5. And it's highly suspenseful. And that's another one. Don't get too much in love with the characters because they might not be around down in a couple of years or two.
boy, is that the truth about that series. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I haven't watched, I've seen this little blurb there.
Yeah. The other thing that I know that I want to tell Scott, despite, my dislike of the level of profanity, he has some very nice writing touches and he does some nice things. So in other words, he doesn't just say the car drives down the road. He really fills it up in a way that isn't fluff. Like at one point early on in the book, when he's negotiating with Sonny, a piece of paper drops and he says the paper drops, but it hits a drop of water from the glass from the drink that they're drinking. So it doesn't slide off. And that's an incredible amount of detail on a very minute point, but it's good writing because those things do happen. And it was a nice filling up of that moment. And I actually took a bunch of notes. He has a bunch of those. I mean, he knows how to write.
Oh, I wish you were here earlier to say that to him when he was
Yeah.
here present.
Yeah.
All right, that's good. Well, any more final thoughts? Anybody want to comment? Okay, well, in that case, here's our book for next time. If you want to pass these down.
I've got a tiny slot on my computer. You're gonna have to squeeze it in.
Yeah. I'll email next week. I'll email the rest of you who aren't here, and if you want to, I can have these held or whatever. Well, no, actually, they can only be held here. So
No,
yeah, come in. Huh?
what about the annex?
Yeah, if you want to pick it up at the annex, you can pick it up there. I'll have them here at Ewald.
Yeah.
So. Okay.
Oh,
Oh, I knew I'd recognize his name because I read The Martian.
yeah,
I read The Martian.
yeah, I like the Martian.
I like The Martian. You didn't like The Martian?
No, I haven't read it.
Oh.
I like that.
I thought it was okay.
Right, and I thought the movie did a
The
good
movie
job.
did a good job too, but the book. was
Has anybody actually read this already?
No,
I did sort of-
it's on one of my to-do lists.
Kathy, was this the one that you recommended?
Yes,
Neil?
I read that. I thought it was really good.
Yeah, I thought you were the one that recommended it, so yeah. So you don't have to read
But
it.
for Martian, you will like this one.
All right.
Well, I never read The Martian, so hopefully I'll like it.
I'm surprised this book has been turned into a movie.
I was gonna say, that one seems to me for a
How could
series.
this book not be a movie?
You know, he is a screenplay writer. He writes he's getting into screenplay writing. He's working on one right now. He's coming up here in August to finish a little writer's getaway to help finish up his latest screenplay.
Well, The Descent, the movie was almost unwatchable for me. It was just so like, oh, no, I ruined this book. So I hope that they do this one, they keep it more, because there's plenty in here to do it straight up and it'd be great.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was thinking
agree
about
with you.
that. I did think of this. I was like, oh, this sounds like it could be a movie. So,
I can think about the casting, about who the characters are already, probably.
yeah, well, I didn't get that far, but it kind of, as I was reading it, and I did listen to part of it. I read some of
Audio,
it,
the audio
and I
book.
did some audio. Yeah.
The audiobook for Mount Fitzroy came out first, because it came out during the pandemic and they weren't printing anything. So I read one of the first audiobooks I've really listened to. I'm not really typically into audiobooks very much. But I listened to this one, and it's done by Ray Porter. He does a lot of various audiobooks, and boy, is he good. If I had to listen to an audiobook again, I would listen to Ray Porter read this book.
I got a question.
So like 34 hours or something like that. But
There's different kinds of audiobooks, right? There's unabridged ones where you really get the whole thing, and then there's ones
Unabridged,
that are
his is
not.
unabridged.
So unabridged is how I think.
That's, his is unabridged.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm reading the book right now. I'm about 2/3 of the way, well, maybe 3/4 of the way done. I can't tell. And I keep hearing Ray Porter's voice in my head as he reads the parts of the characters. So.
Now, they have that also on Hoopla, and it's called graphic audio.
Yeah, that's done by, I haven't listened
They're
to that
like
one.
a
That's
cast of
various
characters,
cast of characters.
and they have
Yeah.
sound effects.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, that's the way the British used to do
Yes.
things like, what was the first one? Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That was the first time I read it. I listened to it, and it was more like an old time radio show where they had a whole cast of actors from England come in, and they did all the different voices.
Oh, wow.
So you didn't get a straight narration. Well, apparently this company, Graphic Audio, is doing this now, and they did, Earthcore, and they do, I just looked it up, Mount Fitzroy too.
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
I have not listened to that one. I only listened to the version that was narrated by one person, which was this Ray Porter. So you might recognize Ray Porter. He also played if you watched the what was it, the Batman or the Justice League, the Batman series of movies.
Okay.
He played the voice of Darkseid. So if that means anything to you, but whatever.
Did you see the new Batman, the Batman?
Yes, I did.
I thought that Colin Farrell character, wow, the penguin was so good.
Oh yeah, he's pretty good at that. Yeah.
I was just thinking that.
That's not my favorite Batman, but
No, it wasn't my Batman, but I had.
No, exactly. It wasn't my Batman, but
Yeah.
I like a lot of the parts of the movie, so.
But I can see Colin Farrell getting all dressed up and being
Well,
all.
they're making a series. There's gonna be a streaming series based just on his character, the Penguin.
Oh, really?
On HBO Max or one of those streaming services.
With him playing it?
With him playing.
Oh, well, they understood that's what I like.
But they'll have cameos of, Pattinson playing his Batman character. and stuff like that too, so. Yeah.
I'm sure we were talking about going to see Dune, remember? I finally watched it on television.
What was your?
And I really liked it. I liked it a lot better than that earlier version, which to me was horrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was surprised I liked it as much as I did.
And also, I forgot to mention also, Scott, if you want to get into his Galactic Football League series, which is the one set far in the future, he actually has that as an audio. He does all these unique voices for all these various aliens and stuff. Oh, it's hilarious. It's funny to watch and listen to, but you're talking about the graphic audio. He does all the voices himself. And it is amazing. He says he's lost his voice reading this book so many times. These weird voices he does. He says it's hard to do that, especially when you have a long novel.
Yeah.
And he does that in his Galactic Football series. So it's on his scottsigler.com. Go to his website, download the book. Listen to it. Yeah.
Did he talk about his time here in Michigan? Because I saw that it looks like he was raised in Charlevoix.
Sheboygan. He was raised in Sheboygan.
Oh, Sheboygan. Okay.
Yeah, he briefly I mentioned it at the very beginning that he was born in Sheboygan. He's a Michigan native son, so.
And he didn't really talk about that too much. We talked more about Spelunky.
Yeah. We only had a half hour, so we really had to keep him focused.
Yeah.
I knew he had to leave at 4:30. I didn't want him to go late because then his wife would be holding it against me maybe.
When's our next meeting?
August, second Wednesday in August.
10th.
Is that August 10th? Yeah.
Put it around,
So.
thinking about it.
Well, then I guess, thanks for everybody for coming. God, you guys had great questions. I wish we had more time. I could talk for another hour about this one, but,
Yeah, that was great. that he was
I'll
here.
try to ask him about the Wawa Mountains.
I'm just curious because I spent all that time in Colorado and we had Denver there as well.
Mhm.
But I thought that why I put it there, you know, 'cause
Yeah.
it's a good.
I'll ask him. I don't know. I never thought about that. Why did he pick where he picked?
Yeah.
You know, I know Mount Fitzroy actually exists.
Yes,
I don't know off the lot, but I assume the Walla Mountains exist, so.
They do.
yeah.
They're in Utah.
Yeah, Utah, right, yeah.
Yeah.
We,
Okay.
All right.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for coming.
all right, thank you.
Next time.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
I was gonna tell you, I was watching this show on PBS. It was 2 episodes, and it was about Japan. This was a lady from England who went to Japan, and she had, just about her different experiences there. And there were 2 things that reminded me of Clara and the Sun. And one was